Welcome to Night Shift. Jeff Sharon here with you. We got a full house. We got Elo. We got the student of the game, Kyle Nash. We got Nick Porcelli. We got Bryson Turner. We have a lot to talk about here. We are handing trophies out everywhere, and they're not participation trophies either. Softball winning the American. Track and field winning the American. We're going to talk about baseball taking 2 out of 3 up in Cincinnati. We even have a little conference realignment news, much to Eric Lopez's chagrin.
Oh, God. No, there's no news. It's just speculation by a bunch of writers who have nothing better to do in their
And a quote for the ages having to do with UCF. All right, so we're going to talk about that and quite a bit more. You can follow us at all of our respective Twitter accounts, Jeff_Sharon, Eric Lopez Elo. It's Bryson Turner, the SOTG for the student of the game, and Nick Porcelli 2, the number 2. Let's get started. Boys, UCF Softball, second consecutive American Athletic Conference championship. It was looking a little rough there at the beginning. Elo, you were there. So were Nick and Bryson down in Tampa because we were pulling double duty between softball and track. But they come back. They get that thrilling victory over Memphis in their first game. Came back from down, and then they won 7-4. They beat the host South Florida 2-0 in a very tight game, and then run-ruled Tulsa in the championship 9-1 in 5 innings. Sarah Willis, the most outstanding player, she did it all. Pitched all 3 games. She has firmly, Eric, cemented herself in UCF softball's pantheon, I think, with her performance, not just this season, but particularly this past weekend. And the Knights are heading to Tallahassee for the NCAA Regional. They hosted by Florida State. They will be in that regional with South Carolina and Marist. But first, we want to talk about this weekend. You've covered all these championships. This one was a little bit, they're all a little bit different, right, Elo? How did this one, from a historical standpoint, stand out to you?
Right at the top. I mean, it's one of the more dramatic ones for sure, probably since the 05, other than the 05 one, which is, one bid league in the A-Sun, and it's the senior class of Stephanie Best with the last chance to make a tournament and win a tournament. This one's just right up there in dramatic because you mentioned it. They were down 4-0 to Memphis in the top of the 4th. They lose that game, their season's coming to an end. To the point where I was told, even talking to sources, that people in the selection committee, were already thinking of making plans of having somebody out there in UCF in the field as they were trailing 4-0. And it looked bleak. Nick and Bryson knows it looked dark. It did not look optimistic. And then the moment that changed the whole week happened in the top of the 4th. Double play turn, and Coach Ball Malone just explodes out of the dugout with a fist pump to the players, getting them going. Let's go, yelling at them, and the players get all fired up. Reminded me a lot about of Josh Heupel in 2018. Remember when he did the famous wave the hands to the fans and helped turn the momentum around of that game? The exact same thing happened here. Knights score 7 unanswered runs. They chip away. Kennedy seriously legs out a triple, scores the first run, and then the home run in the bottom of the 6th from Jasmine Williams, that place erupted. And to win that game. And then you got to play the host team, South Florida, one last time between the Bulls and the Knights. Great atmosphere there, great crowds for both sides, and a fantastic pitcher's duel. Chloe Evans 2-run homer. Sarah Willis magnificent with some great defense. Carson Fryer and company. They win that game and then blow out Tulsa to win the championship. Significant, because if they lose before the championship game, they're not making the NCAA tournament. If they lose to Tulsa, it's going to be between them and Mississippi State, possibly in South Alabama for the last spot. So there was a ton of pressure. Thankfully, this will be the last year we have to worry about this because we'll be in the Big 12, so we don't have to worry about dropping 8 spots for winning 4 games because of stupid computers that Jeff loves so much. So the Knights win. Historic title in Tampa at that field. It's a historic weekend and a week for softball, and go out on top in the American, which is pretty good. First UCF softball team to go back-to-back titles. First UCF team to win a championship in Tampa. Of course, they would be joined a day later, but it was pretty fun.
Sarah Willis, I mean, what can you say about what she was able to do on the hill? She's at an 18-3 record right now on the season. Where is she right now in the rankings of UCF pitchers after this?
Ooh. Well, I mean, we got to let the story be finished, but certainly she's turned it on in the second half of the year, winning the Pitcher of the Year, third UCF pitcher to win Pitcher of the Year in a conference, second in the American. I mean, she's definitely taken it to a different level. And Bryson knows the story because Sarah Willis, Bryson, was a two-way player most of the year, and then Sydney Ball-Malone had a sit-down with her that changed the whole season for Sarah.
Yes, it's still one of my favorite post games of the entire season. Season after the perfect game that she had, where essentially Ball Malone told the story of how she had a very similar experience when she was a player. When her coach told her, we need your pitching. We're going to focus on that. So Coach Ball Malone did the same thing with Sarah. And ever since she really almost solely focused on pitching with maybe one odd pinch hit appearance, maybe every once in a while, she has been an absolute gauntlet of a pitcher. She, over the course of this conference tournament, Eric can attest to this. I was beside myself that she was still going.
Yeah, she went all 3 days. Yeah,
the second one round. I mean, she came in relief of Grace Jewell, first of all, to get the win and really really play an integral role in saving the game against Memphis. And then she follows that up by going 12 more innings, 17 consecutive innings pitched over 3 days. I'm sorry. Again, as a guy that comes from baseball, that it just is beside myself of the athletic wherewithal that Sarah had to go through in order to perform such a feat. And what's funnier is that the last UCF pitcher to get 3 wins in a conference tournament, Allison Keim, was on the premises.
Yeah, she was working studio assignment for the American Conference. Yeah, she did it 15 years ago in CUSA. Yeah, no, it's historic. I mean, this was Sarah Willis we expected. This is why she was a top 5, top 10 player in the country out of high school. It's taken to a different level, and they've gotten timely hitting. Jasmine Williams, fantastic, 2 home runs in the tournament. You have Chloe Evans hit the other home run. She's been fantastic. There is not a better UCF head coach right now on campus in getting players in the portal or evaluating talent than Sydney Ball Malone right now.
This tournament, if anything, I think has proved because we have talked a lot this season about Sarah Willis and Chloe Evans. They have been doing really well the entire season. That I think a lot of people really underappreciated the stuff that Jasmine Williams. This tournament was her coming out party, and of course, it had to be on Mother's Day weekend. Not only did she get 2 home runs that were both integral in getting the title, of course, the go-ahead against Memphis, and then basically the dagger against Tulsa. But she's also was the one turning those double plays that proved so crucial.
Yeah, her and Macario. Yeah, I've been a fantastic combo, including that one in Memphis that changed the whole momentum around because Nick knows very well. It was very dark. There was a very good chance that Nick was going to take me to the hospital if we lost it.
Well, the end result is UCF gets that auto bid, and their RPI ended up, Eric, at 43, which is not where you want to be. Like that's very much on the bubble, on the verge of sliding off. But they face South Carolina in the first game of the Tallahassee Regional. Break down this regional for us, Eric, because you're in there at Florida State, which has been a bugaboo for UCF in the past in Tallahassee. FSU's RPI is 3. They're 50-8 this year, and 30-2 at home. They're one of only 3 teams that have won 50 games this year, along with UCLA and Oklahoma. This is going to be it's tough, but how doable is it?
Well, first of all, you can argue this one or Salt Lake are the 2 toughest regionals in the entire NCAA tournament by far. In fact, there's a reason why ESPN's sending one of their marquee broadcast teams to Tallahassee, and Courtney Lyle and Danielle Laurie, who's a former Husky great, knows Coach Ball Malone and Jen Sallin, the assistant. They play together part of the national title. But this is a stacked region. Obviously, South Carolina, red hot, just got to the SEC tournament championship game. They have a pitcher that right now has kind of become a big buzz, and Donnie Goborn, who has 189 strikeouts and 120 innings pitched. Can dominate, can throw about 72, 73, which in softball terms is like 100 in baseball. So they've got good pitching, good experience there. They're stacked. A lot of people think they could pull an upset here. And then you got Marist representing as the 4 seed. Good fun note here on Marist. Their head coach is Joe Assanio, former Yankee relief pitcher, Jeffrey. Former Yankee relief pitcher. I believe he was during the
be a Yankee.
Yeah. Former wrestler, too. He was an independent wrestler after his baseball career.
Clearly, he was better at baseball than wrestling. But anyway,
I think he was during the Buck Showalter era. He was the relief pitcher there. So, but this is a stacked regional. We knew this. Anytime you go to Tallahassee, it's going to be stacked because they always bust an SEC team. I thought it was going to be Florida or Auburn. It didn't turn out that way. It was South Carolina because Clemson inexplicably got to host. Which is good because, the ACC can, who knows how many more chances they'll get to host before their league implodes, evidently. But so I think it's going to be a tough regional, a low-scoring regional. Florida State, you mentioned, they are a national championship contender. I think they're the biggest threat to Oklahoma. They have depth. Alani Alameda does a great job. They have tremendous depth and pitching-wise. Catherine Sandercock is somebody UCF saw 2 years ago in the Tallahassee Regional. They have a good balanced offense. So this is a tough one. This is a tough regional to get out of. I think the level will be very high, and UCF's going to have to play at a very high level to try to have a shot to win this regional. But the way Sarah's pitching, then their defense and pitching, I mean, it's a lot of people think this is a 3-team regional for sure that can win it.
UCF's first opponent, South Carolina, like you mentioned, South Carolina has won 3 of the last 5 against UCF in the all-time series, although UCF does have a 7-3 advantage in the all-time series. Interestingly enough, 2 of those UCF wins were in Tallahassee back in 2015.
2015 regional, yeah. They were paired up again in 2015. Knights beat them to get to the regional final. These 2 teams have played home and home series the last 2 years. They played last year at UCF. 2 years ago, they played at South Carolina. So these are they're very familiar with each other. And UCF is familiar with South Carolina's ace because she was a transfer out of FAU.
Yeah, so the Tallahassee Regional, first game for UCF, when is it, Eric, and where can we see it?
Friday night, primetime, ESPN2. That's the marquee game in primetime Friday night. UCF a draw. In fact, I just got numbers. Their American Conference Championship game, it went over Tulsa, drew at 11 a.m., keep in mind. Did 164,000 viewers. It's the most watched American Conference Championship game in 7 years. So,
wow.
People like the UCF product in softball. I'm just saying.
Shocking.
Prime time.
Shocking, right?
And let's not forget that Ball Malone talked about how this team, all these core members, all have an opportunity to come back next year, which is I think very
huge momentum. This core coming back. I've said this before. I think the 2 sports that can compete right away in the Big 12 in the next couple of years is softball and women's soccer. I think those two, and we'll get to women's soccer later, but I think those are the 2 that stands out right now.
So Friday, Marist against Florida State at 4, UCF against South Carolina at 7. Saturday, the winners game at 1, losers game at 3:30, and then the elimination game at 6, weather permitting, obviously. Sunday is the regional championship day at 4 p.m. if necessary. Final game following that immediately, so you can follow us on that one. Eric, you're going to be all over it. Eric Lopez Elo on Twitter. So, we'll all be watching together, and let's hope that we can get through Tallahassee this time around. I think that would be a lot of fun. By the way, we have more to talk about with UCF and Florida State in a little bit, so stay tuned on that. Much to
Kyle
Eric's
smiling.
I really don't care what Eric says about this, okay? Because this is going to
That's fine. I'm just going to stare at the conference championship trophy that we brought back from Tampa.
Fine by me. You have earned the right to admire that.
Oh, you see, this team's won 20 of 21, by the way, currently. It's won 20 out of 21.
Is that good? I think that's good.
Just saying.
Pretty good.
Can we see that?
Speaking of good, UCF track and field also brought home a conference championship from Tampa. Bryson is particularly excited about this. A little bit of rain getting in the way, but UCF was able to take home the AAC championship. For the second straight year, UCF has done this in both the indoor and outdoor seasons. The Knights tied their own record conference record with 163 points, 58 points better than Houston in second place. And Rannell Jones was once again named the most valuable performer, and Dana Boone and her staff named AAC Coaching Staff of the Year. Can't do much better than winning the conference championship on USF's track. The highlights for us, Bryson, take us right through it. You know, we talked about Rannell Jones doing Rannell Jones things. Triple jump, Ashera Collins and Jasmine Scott Kilgo both landed on the podium. Jasmine had another great tournament, as well as did Latasha Smith. What were the performances that stood out to you and really pushed UCF over the top here?
I would really look at the sprint events, because I mentioned this beforehand. One of the reasons that UCF is able to get so many points like they do is because they inundate these sprint events with their athletes. They're so deep in the sprint category that they just block every other team from the event final, which gets them all of the points. So, and what's really interesting about all this, by the way, is that 3 of the 4 events that they got, because they got about half of their 163 points over the course of about 4 events: the 100 dash, the 200 dash, the 400 dash, and the 100 meter hurdles. 3 of those 4 events had their trials, their qualifying for the final, past 9 o'clock at night. This was after the 4-hour, 45-minute rain delay that occurred, during which time Nick and I had a night shift with Eric Lopez. That was quite a fun experience, doing that from a car while it was pouring rain outside. But they got a lot of athletes into the finals, and if there weren't a lot of athletes, they were very, very good, such as, of course, Latasha Smith, who set the program record in both the 200 and the 400 dash. In fact, she actually has the second fastest 200-meter dash time in the country right now. Jeff Sharon. I know we talk about Rannell Jones doing Rannell Jones and getting 2 gold medals and a bronze medal, and getting most valuable performer is Rannell doing Rannell things, vintage Rannell, I would say. But don't count out Latasha Smith, Ashera Collins, and these other athletes. There are a lot of UCF athletes that I think could make a lot of noise in the postseason, which is going to be coming up with the East Preliminary in Jacksonville.
Yeah. I thought that the really fun stat to see, Bryson, was the women's 100 meters. 6 of the 8 qualifiers were UCF runners. That's nuts. I mean, there's no other way to say that. That's just absolutely crazy. And in addition to that, you had in the 400, Kia Williams won that one. Latasha Smith finished in 3rd. Tasha and Kia finished. That was the other event, but I mean, it was just a remarkable meet once again for UCF, just loading up on the podium, and that's what got them to the overall championship. And what does this say for Dana Boone here, Bryson? Because she goes out in the American era with 2 straight titles, not unlike what we saw from. What we saw from Carol Smith Gilbert at the end of the Conference USA era, dominating in track and field in that conference as well. This is tremendous for the program heading into the Big 12.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Coach Boone is the one that coaches the sprints, by the way. There are basically 3 different divisions of the track and field team. There are the sprints and the hurdlers, which is coached by Boone. There's the distance team, which is coached by Brian Jackson. And then there's the field events, which are coached by Glenn Smith. So when you look at Ashera Collins, Jasmine Scott Kilgo, and Adrian Adams, you could thank Glenn Smith for that one. But these sprinters are the piece de resistance, I guess, of this UCF track and field team. And we have not seen, I think, a sprint team this good since those Carol Smith Gilbert days in 2013. Rannell Jones, for instance, became the first track and field athlete since Octavius Freeman, so second ever, to run a below 11-second 100-meter dash. So I think that with Rannell being kind of like the headliner, kind of like that Ariel Scott, Octavius Freeman type. Honestly, I would argue Rannell Jones and Latasha Smith paired together are kind of like the next iteration of this kind of dynamic duo of sprinters that Octavius Freeman and Ariel Scott were back in those days.
NCAA East prelims are in Jacksonville on May 25th, 26th, and 27th. We'll be previewing that in our show next week as UCF goes for, hoping to get some athletes back to the NCAA Outdoor Championships, which will be in Austin June 7th through the 10th, which will make that the last event of the academic year. Looks like, unless all kinds of weird stuff happens in baseball.
Let's appreciate this past week what just transpired, though, to have softball and track in Tampa within 24 hours of each other win conference championships. Could be the last two conference championships ever in the American for UCF, unless baseball wins the tournament in Clearwater. So very historic and a dominant.
Which I wouldn't rule out.
Sure, but just let's not. Again, and it's softball and track, which has dominated really the landscape here the last couple of years for UCF, kind of representing the women's sports dominance over the last couple of years at UCF. So I had a pretty historic week, and I think that's why I definitely don't take it for granted, because it'll be a lot harder to win conference championships in the Big 12. But that was a pretty special moment, and congrats to the track team for knocking that off once again in dominant style.
I'm sure American Athletic Conference Commissioner Mike Oresco and former USF President Judy Genshaft are rather thrilled at the events that transpired.
I didn't see a lot of USF people on the facilities in the championship day. Definitely not in softball. I don't think. Did you guys see any USF people? I don't think they were too fired up.
They were in the dugout.
Yeah. Hey, Eric, you said it. Like, once they won, it seemed like the security at the stadium just wanted them to leave.
Oh, they wanted us to leave. We were walking on the field. I walked towards the entire field, and I'm like, I'm going to take my sweet time walking over here with the trophy. Thank you very much, if you don't mind. So, yeah, I agree. That's but, hey, listen, follow Nick and Bryce on Instagram, on Black and Gold Bear. Throughout the whole week, they did a bunch of videos from there on the YouTube channel. There's post games. And also the post. So there's a lot of content of basically a takeover of Tampa, UCF style, basically.
Yeah, we took over that place. It was great. It was fun. Real quick, I want to get to baseball. They took 2 out of 3 from Cincinnati in Cincinnati. They have a midweek against Bethune, and then they're back home for the final weekend of the regular season against Wichita State. Right now, the standings look like this. UCF is in 4th in the American at 10-11 in the conference. Having leapt over Cincinnati, who's at 9-12. Wichita is in front of them by 3 games in the loss column. 12-8 are the Shockers, but overall, Wichita State's 29-21. UCF's 29-23 overall. Very tight at the top with Houston and ECU. 15-5 are the Cougars. ECU at 15-6. Obviously, we have some rainouts that figured into that. But as we get ready for Clearwater, Bryson Turner. Again, a key weekend for UCF against Wichita, and obviously, as Eric alluded to earlier, UCF's only chance to get to the NCAA tournament is to win the American Athletic Conference Championship in Clearwater. Well, how would that look? Obviously, like we said last week, the tournament splits the 8 teams into 2 4-team double elimination brackets, 1 versus 8, 4 versus 5 in one, and then all 4 in the other. So right now, if the season were over this weekend, UCF would be in a bracket with Houston, the 1, Cincinnati, the 5, and Tulane, the 8. With Wichita State coming up, how do you feel, Bryson, about where UCF is right now? We talk about ECU being a half game back of Houston for the conference regular season title. But ECU overall, they're 38-14, and Houston's 31-20. So who would you rather face heading into this? Or how? Obviously, UCF wants to win as much as they can, but it's time to keep an eye on things. Would you rather face Houston or ECU at some point?
Houston, 100%. Any bracket that avoids ECU for the longest amount of time possible is a good bracket. I mean, remember when we got to the conference final in 2021 against USF, we had to wait until the semifinals to face ECU, and even then, we needed a second game to do it. So the longer I could avoid ECU, the better. And especially because it'll give Coach Lovelady some time to figure out with the whole pitching situation, because in the last 4 weekends, UCF has not had a weekend ERA lower than 6 on the individual weekend. This one against Cincinnati, they had 7.5. Of course, they had that run rule game again in that first one. So, and while Cameron Leiter is showing some resurgence, I am very impressed with what I've seen out of him. But it seems like we've seen a little bit of a regression as of late in Rudy Gomez. So it feels like he needs to kind of get back what he got at the beginning of the season, and then you just need that third pitcher. It seems like that's been a revolving door of pitchers as of late in that third spot. But if Lovelady can figure that out with this high-powered offense that's approaching 100 home runs on the season, by the way, they have 98 now. They just
each time they hit one, it's a new school record.
Yes, indeed. But they're about to reach the century mark. They have 4 games. They have a few, like 5, at least 6 games to hit 2 home runs to get to the century mark. And that would honestly be ultra impressive. This team more and more is reminding me of the 2010 team, Jeff and Eric, where the offense was just pure historic, just blowing people's minds, while the pitching is just not providing the support that, like, the offense is really doing a lot of the heavy lifting on this team. So the pitching just needs to, I've said it before, in the conference tournament, you need good pitching depth. Like pitching gets you a conference championship. So that this pitching rotation really needs to kind of find itself in this last weekend, and then then you just go into Clearwater and do the best you can.
Look at the RPIs right now. Houston is at 92. ECU is in regardless. They're at 19, so it's no problem for them. Wichita right behind Houston at 98. So as I'm looking at this schedule, by the way, Wichita State, they are playing, who are they playing? Or excuse me, not Wichita State, I'm sorry. ECU is at South Florida to finish the season for 3 games. And Houston is at home for 3 against Cincinnati. So I think slight advantage to Houston there, at least as of right now.
The American,
because ECU is playing on the road. Really, that's the only reason.
The American is such a wide open conference. It's ECU and the rest and the rest of them, really. And even though ECU seems to have faltered a little bit this season, it's still them. It's still
by
them
their standards.
Yeah, and so I mean, when you look at the American standings, it's just everyone is just essentially cannibalizing each other, kind of like how the SEC does in football. You know, they just eat. So I'm not going to trust any, like, you know, as far as these rankings go in terms of like Cincy and Houston, because Cincy run ruled us in the first game, and then we almost run ruled them in the next one. We had the opportunity to do it, couldn't come up with it, but the opportunity was there. So it just kind of shows you how different just a day makes in conference series like this. So I would just have anything, as long as ECU is not involved in that game, arguably, I would just like take any preconceived notions going in with a pinch of salt.
Scheduled for the Knights, Bethune-Cookman once again at home at 6 p.m. Tuesday, if you're listening to this. Prior to that, Wichita State, Thursday, Friday, Saturday at John Giuliano Park. All games will be on ESPN Plus as well. And the reason why they're doing it one day early is so that everyone can get down to Clearwater in due time. Baycare Ballpark, Tuesday, May 23rd through Sunday, May 28th. Sunday before Memorial Day for the American Athletic Conference Championship. UCF's last go-round in Clearwater at the AAC Championships. Speaking of the AAC, and, well, let's talk a little money for a little bit. And I want to get the student of the game, Kyle Nash, in here because he's going to really enjoy this. Eric, not so much. But there was a quote that dropped today, and we're talking about Florida State, who, of course, UCF, like we mentioned earlier, softball's playing Florida State, and we missed on that segue. But, Kyle, This week was the ACC's meetings in Amelia Island, and their athletic director Michael Alford had a quote that was rather surprising when I actually heard it. Obviously, the ACC situation with its TV contract, it goes through 2036. And has essentially locked them into a deal that FSU and several other schools, notably Clemson, Miami, believe it undervalues them. Alfred said that there's a $30 million gap starting next season, and that can't go on for years because you just can't catch up. Speaking about the ACC in relation to the SEC and the Big Ten. The Big 12 obviously just recently renegotiated its TV contract a little early, as UCF knows. And he was asked about UCF and the Big 12 and the TV contract. And this was the quote, and bear in mind, this is Florida State's AD saying this. Quote, "If you look at the revenue projections, they, UCF, should have a better agreement than we have by going out to market. That means there's going to be another school in the state that's going to have a better agreement than Miami and us. And that's just not acceptable to us." End quote. So we now live in a world, Kyle Nash, where Florida State and Miami are openly complaining about the fact that they don't make as much money as UCF does in a media deal. Whoa. when you see that in black and white, it's pretty stark considering, what UCF has been through over the past, I don't know, since 1979, no?
Well, I'll put it this way. You've heard me be oft critical of the ACC on this and pretty much any pod show situation where I talk about the ACC and their standing in football. So all I could say is I tried to tell you, but you wouldn't listen. Now, with that joking aside, gentlemen, I will say this. Say what you will about how bad the deal might have been conceived, and it's that deal that's the problem. Say what you will about, how you feel about FSU. I know I kid with Eric Lopez all the time that he should start a landscaping business called the Grassy Knoll. That's how big a Seminole fan he is. I get all that. But really, the fact that UCF is being referred to even as a peer in the state of Florida in football, this is landmark stuff for UCF as a program in the sport. And I think really that should be the focus for UCF fans here. This is a milestone. Forget about July 1st with the actual flipping of the calendar and the Big 12 deal. This moment right here is where you got acknowledged as one of the main powers in football in a football state out in public. Period, point blank, end of story. And I would even say that this sets as evaluation for UCF moving forward. Not that they need to really use evaluation at the moment. They're in the Big 12 deal. It's going to be really awesome. I get all that. But to hear the official acknowledgement such that it is a pretty big deal, in my opinion.
Yeah. The reports coming out of this as we approach the offseason are getting pretty interesting. Obviously, we've been keeping an eye on what the Big 12 has been looking at in terms of possible expansion. And in fact, the list of schools mentioned for Big 12 expansion has itself expanded in recent weeks. We know about the four corner schools from the Pac-12: Colorado, Arizona State, Arizona, and Utah. Some of the others that have been mentioned recently: San Diego State and UNLV, UConn, strictly because of basketball. Memphis has been mentioned, Colorado State, SMU, Fresno, way further down the pecking order. But as we spin that forward to the ACC, there is a term that I'm starting to see happen a little bit more often in some of it, and this is the Magnificent Seven, they call themselves. Among them, Florida. Yes. Among them, Florida. Three of the seven we know: Florida State, Miami, Clemson. Do we know who the other four are exactly? I'm not exactly sure. It's half the league. It's 14. It's because the ACC is 14. But these seven schools are considering and are reportedly gathering their lawyers together to see if there's any way out of that grant of rights that the ACC has signed with ESPN. if they're able to find their way out of it, that's seven schools that may very well, some percentage of them may or may not consider the Big 12 as a destination. It's not lost on me, nor should it be lost on anybody else, that it is mid-May. We are approaching the month of June. July 1st is the turnover. A lot of when UCF officially joins the Big 12, and this is also the time when a lot of teams or a lot of schools, if there is movement, will announce it prior to July the 1st in order to give the sort of the appropriate year's notice in their contracts. Is there smoke here, Kyle Nash, in terms of the ACC?
Well, there's obviously smoke here, but I think it's being caused by a bunch of dry ice with the concept of the Magnificent Seven, because with what I understand of the deal, and granted, this is one of those where, and I hope he feels better, this is one of those where I'd like Drew Glukov on my hip to kind of confirm what I'm thinking here. But as far as the Magnificent Seven in and of itself as an entity, you would need that rights deal, that exclusivity to be dissolved first. And all that complaining about it and declaring that as a possibility has done is completely prevented you from doing it. The main thing, the best way to have done it, you need to do some Game of Thrones stuff, basically. But seeing this $30 million gap with the SEC is the selling point that they should have used and said, hey, listen, we need to dissolve this beast for fear of never being great again and re-signing it. And then in there, kind of crafting the road to building off this separate league. There's too many steps for them to just do it on a pivot immediately to solve for the problems that they're seeing now. If they wanted to make this move, Jeff, they would have needed to have done it a while back leading into this agreement for it to be possible. And it's not. They signed that right away. Well, now, the barbarians are at the proverbial gate here, and the plan that you would need to craft to make something like this happen isn't practical, in my opinion.
The 7 schools, and thank you for...
You need 8 schools. You need 8 schools, too, to dissolve, and they're not going to get 8. And by the way, I see no Yul Brynner or Val Kilmer in this Magnificent Seven, okay? NC State and Magnificent should never be in the same sentence.
Oh, no.
Well, here's the 7, and thanks to Nick for dropping this into the chat, and this is according to Ross Dellinger as well. North Carolina, Clemson, Florida State, NC State, Miami, Virginia, Virginia Tech.
Because when I think Magnificent, I think Virginia Tech.
Hey, don't we all? Be lovely Blacksburg, Virginia. Yeah.
Well, I mean,
don't throw too much shade at my guy Ryan Swoboda now.
So essentially, if your school is in Florida, the Carolinas, or Virginia, those are the 7.
Yeah.
Unless you're Wake Forest
or Charlotte, that's now in the American.
Well, Syracuse isn't in either of those places, but anyway. What do we expect to hear? And I'm interested to see if Elo wants to jump in on this. We're now a month and a half from July the 1st, and the stuff that's signed, sealed, and delivered happening. I'm gonna go a little speculative here, channeling my inner Kara Swisher and Scott Galloway. Give me a prediction, Kyle Nash. What might we see in the next month and a half that we don't see coming?
I think a lot of that is the West Coast stuff. If you're asking about the ACC, let's see, what do I see them saying next? The precise quote is, "I have it in my vision." No, but joking aside, I think really the stuff that we are going to see is going to be out West. I think there's a lot of battling going on with the Pac-12 and the Big 12 to find suitors. The whole Villanova situation's interesting. I know that's something we're kind of seeing, but I think I'll put it this way. The next big movement that is going to be truly unpredictable at this point is either going to be if the ACC is dumb enough to dissolve the agreement to just burn it because we can't catch up, or some sort of movement from Notre Dame. If the ACC can somehow rope them in with NBC, and I know this is out there on a prayer, long shot kind of situation, but if they could kind of rope them in and give them some sort of a sweetheart deal, that's the tide that raises all ships. That's the only thing I could really come up with. And I know I'm the Notre Dame conspiracy theorist on these topics, but that's where I'm
Speaking of Notre Dame conspiracy theory, what if you're the Big Ten?
You wouldn't let that happen, obviously, right?
Yeah. Would you start like making entreaties toward Notre Dame now? Because guess what, Eric? There's your 8th school.
They already have, sure. But go ahead, Eric.
So
How about this? How about they can just look in the mirror and realize who they actually are? That's a basketball conference. And by the way, NC State, you're irrelevant. Miami, you haven't been relevant in football in forever. Virginia, you're definitely not relevant in football. Carolina, you're a basketball school.
Keep going down the list. Keep going.
Virginia Tech, you're really irrelevant. Clemson, your time has run out. That's it. Done. And Florida State, hey, maybe if you hire the right coaches and you didn't have to go through multiple coaches, you would be making more money right now. So this is a bunch of whining adults who are whining about millions of dollars in a time where the economy is going down the dumpster. I have no sympathy for this nonsense. It's nonsense. It's disgraceful.
If he keeps talking like this, Jeff, they might mistake me for him like they did with Drew on the art.
Well,
right,
as we all know, Eric, you're right in principle, but they don't think like that.
The only schools out of that group that could find a home, guaranteed, is North Carolina because of their basketball. I think they could definitely go and get into the SEC, for example. And maybe that's where an NC State they're hoping to just plug along with Carolina. And Virginia.
USC and Cal.
Correct. USC, UCLA. Yeah. Everybody else, there's no guarantee. There's no guarantee you're going to find a home. And by the way, the Big 12 is a bad fit for most of those schools. It's a bad fit. Like Florida State versus Texas Tech. Really? What are we doing here?
And let's not forget, Yormark has said that he wants to focus out west.
Correct.
That's where they already have this coast down. So it's just.
Not really. Let's be honest.
Okay, maybe one ACC school to pair with like UC. Maybe you get FSU or Miami.
Florida State.
If FSU goes up to Yormark, and obviously they can't, Eric, I know, but if FSU goes up to Yormark and says, yo, like he says no, please. Yeah, I'm with that.
No, I agree with you.
Yormark's not going to say no.
No, Florida State could be your travel partner. That's fine. But I think Florida State would try to go to the SEC first, and I think the SEC is going to laugh at them.
And by the way, so we can link this. If that actually happened, it can't. I know. I think you have your replacement for USF as rivalries go, gentlemen. Especially when there's cash trash out there in the media that they're talking.
Well, let's just go ahead with these super conferences. It's the NFC and the AFC.
Uh-oh.
It's the pro football model. Let's just go ahead and just ruin the college athletics.
I mean, I would argue though that with how aggressive I've seen Yormark be. I know people talk about the Power 2 with the SEC and the Big Ten, but I feel like with the way that how aggressive Yormark is as a commissioner, I'm almost wondering if he tried to make it more of a Big 3. Because I'm
sure that's what he's shooting for. Now you could also be, but sometimes that could backfire on you and be overly aggressive, and then it's going to implode on you in due time. So you got to be careful not to be too overly aggressive, because some of these ideas is a little out there.
You know, Bryson, when he was here on campus, I asked him about that very thing of how he sees the Big Ten and the SEC as competition, and it was a political answer, but I read between the lines a little bit too. What I interpreted from it is he's not trying to catch them, but I think he sees that Big 3 possibility, certainly, especially if these other schools are going to devour themselves with infighting. These other conferences, I should say.
Considering all of the backdoor the backdoor stuff that we're seeing, I remember thinking back to a little less than a year ago, June 30th, 2022. I'm on vacation in Pittsburgh, and all of a sudden I see on Twitter that USC and UCLA are going to the Big Ten. Yep. And I'm like, what? So honestly, I would just be circling June 30th, 2023.
Oh, you're right. Absolutely.
Right now, because I feel like if there's going to be a hammer dropping, it probably will end up happening then.
Go ahead, Kyle. Last word.
You're looking for something that you don't see coming here. I'll say this. All these other schools that are going to feel slighted should the ACC dissolve, you better bet Oresco is going to be starting to collect some other.
NC State, East Carolina rivalry in the America is going to be incredible. Earth shattering.
Kind of like that upcoming Oregon State and whatever in the Mountain West thing that we're going to have.
I mean, we joke, but
if
some of those AC schools do that and rise the tide to the ship of being a quote from going from a lower tier ACC school to an upper tier American school, but bring everybody up to that lower tier ACC dollar mark. The American wins; those schools get to put some other rings on them on their belt, so to speak, and then get the opportunity to jump back up into the Premier League in their own right. It's not a bad move if the ACC's in this much trouble, which I believe all five of us think it is.
Yeah, I just think of that GIF with the guy kind of overlooking the battlefield, going, "Let them fight."
Yeah,
Godzilla 2014.
Thank you. Let them fight. Let them fight.
Agreed. That's what
we're just going to sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. It's going to be great. All right, so we'll be following that, I'm sure, in the next 6 weeks as we go. May 16th is when we're recording this show, and man, stuff's starting to heat up. All right, now
a lot of idiots running college athletics, guys. Moral of the story.
Give this man a hug.
Hey,
idiots.
They see dollar signs, they're going to go after him. I mean, it's
of course, God forbid they would sell their families.
There's a reason they say it's the golden rule. Those who have the gold make the rules.
They have plenty of money. They've just done not a terrible job spending it. That's what they don't. It's kind of like the baseball owner it's like all these pro owners that complain about. I don't have enough money.
Name me one business owner who has ever said, "Oh, I have enough money."
Me. I have plenty. I have enough money. Thank you for what I get compensated broadcasting. I'm always appreciative. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Let's move over to. I want to talk a little bit about some Big 12 stuff. We had some schedules drop. Bryson Turner. I know you wanted to get in here and talk about this. I want to start with volleyball. That's the most recent one that dropped on Tuesday. UCF's Big 12 volleyball schedule. The non-conference stuff hasn't been set yet, but the Big 12 volleyball schedule, UCF is playing at home this season. Opponents at home got 2 matches against Oklahoma, 1 against West Virginia, Kansas State, 2 against TCU, 2 against BYU, 1 against Texas. Pretty good schedule pulling in Oklahoma and Texas, wouldn't you say, Bryson?
Yes. The format is very intriguing to me, and Eric, if you're able to shed a little bit of light on that, I'd appreciate it. But I think the biggest stuff that I'm noticing when looking at this, I haven't tweeted it yet, but it probably will be on Twitter by the time we're done recording. Is the RPI of last season from these Big 12 teams? So opponent wise, this is ignoring. I'm not going by match numbers. This is on opponents. The first 5 opponents that UCF will face on this Big 12 schedule is so Cincy, Oklahoma, Texas Tech, West Virginia, Kansas State, none of them have an RPI lower than 67. So that's the prelude for what will be a gauntlet for the rest of the season, where you have Baylor, TCU, Houston, BYU, Texas, Iowa State, Kansas. None of those teams have an RPI lower or OPI high or 35 or higher. And even then, TCU is ranked 35. If you want to take TCU out of that equation, every single opponent in that phase of the season, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 opponents are in the top 30 RPI in 2022, including national champion Texas, who is going to be coming here. So
last home match of the season, first ever national champion to play at the venue ever in UCF volleyball. This Texas is probably going to be. Penn State was here a couple of years ago, Stanford in 2008, and now Texas. Those are the 3 biggest brands that have ever played in the venue. That's the highlight there, with Texas coming in on that. The scheduling formula is interesting. Some of it is travel. Like, for example, UCF's hosting BYU twice. So that way they don't, instead of doing a home and home where you got to go to Provo and they kind of eliminate some of that. Some of this was also RPI based motivated. So it's a combination of those things. That's how the schedule formula was created, based on, hey, you're going home, 2 matches at home, 2 on the road. It's travel and RPI all kind of combined.
All right. Women's soccer also announced their Big 12 schedule, Eric, and I'm interested to see how you see this. Big 12 opener September 14th against West Virginia. UCF also gets Kansas, Texas, Baylor, Texas Tech at home. On the road, Houston, Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, Cincinnati, BYU. Obviously, we talk about men's soccer. There is no men's soccer in the Big 12, so we're going to wait on the Sun Belt Conference to figure out what they're going to do with UCF and their and that soccer.
Maybe they
can
get some of the ACC schools. Those are big men's soccer programs. They can get them over this.
Well, they pulled over some SEC schools, so why not? But the women's soccer schedule. What's your breakdown of this for Tiffany Roberts-Sahadak and company? Because that's going to be the first. Is this right? I think that's going to September 14th. That's going to be the first UCF Big 12 conference game of any kind, right?
Yeah, correct. West Virginia, which is, by the way, a powerhouse in women's soccer. So it's right off the bat. You got Texas coming in, and as well, the UCF has played Texas, ironically, of course, the last 2 years, home and home. So remember, the women's soccer tournament will be in Round Rock, Texas. So Bryson and Nick, if you want to make a trip, cover women's soccer, got to go all the way to Round Rock, Texas. The days of driving to conference championships are probably over in most of these sports. But for UCF, I think, again, women's soccer might have the least adjustment from this standpoint. The conference games for the Big 12 are Thursday, Sunday. That's what UCF has been used to in the American, whereas volleyball is all over. You got basically a majority of them are Thursdays and Fridays with some Saturdays sprinkled in volleyball. Now, UCF women's soccer does have a Monday match at BYU because BYU cannot play on Sunday. So that's going to be very interesting to see how they handle that schedule from that standpoint. But that's something to keep in mind. Volleyball will be Thursdays and Fridays with an occasional Saturdays. And the reason for that is they're trying to avoid football, basically, which is smart. And soccer is going to stay on Thursdays and Sundays. That's one thing the Big 12 tries to do, is to give each sport its own day instead of trying to conflict as often as we saw in the American in that regard. So, again, Coach Sahadak and company, that's going to be exciting, right? That'll be historic, very fitting. Women's soccer will kick things off for the Big 12 era with West Virginia. Then, like you said, we'll see what the Sun Belt does. Volleyball, obviously. Those are wondering, by the way, do not be surprised if we hear later in this week a decision on what UCF decides to do with the head coach situation. So look for that later this week.
All right. Well, we keep an eye on that. One more, actually, a few more shout-outs that we wanted to get out here before we get out of here. Rowing finished third place in the American, Bryson Turner, and considering all that they went through this year, the changeover with their head coach, the storm damage to their facility that they had to deal with, for them to, obviously this is, I'm sure that they look at third place in the American, they're like, that's not up to our standards, but I think they deserve a shout out, and I know so do you, because of all that adversity that they had to go through. Finish in third place in the conference. Congratulations to them, because that's hard to do. You can really see the bottom drop out of some programs when you've gone through what they've gone through, and they pushed through.
They really have. This means that they have finished on the podium in the American Athletic Conference rowing tournament, and every single year they have been an American member, which is not an easy thing to do. And considering where they were coming off, because I did some digging in some previous appearances, they had finished 8th in the Conference USA rowing tournament in 2013 before changing conferences. So to go from that to finishing on the podium every single year in the American after that is a very well done achievement. And now, of course, they're going to be going into the Big 12, where they're going to be reuniting with some of the schools that they used to row against in the Conference USA days, including the Alabama Crimson Tide. So we're going to be in the same conference as Alabama in something.
Yeah, Alabama and Tennessee. That's it's interesting you mentioned that, because they are both in the Big 12 in rowing. So shout out to UCF rowing. Another shout out, Nick Porcelli. We got to get you in here on this. Rannell Hall has won a championship. He's a member of the Arlington Renegades of the XFL, who defeated the DC Defenders in the XFL championship game in San Antonio. Rannell's got himself a ring.
Yes, sir. And isn't it the wonder of the XFL that in a league that had 4 teams with a winning record, none of them won the championship?
Right.
It's a team that finished with exactly 500. So
yeah, they were 4-6 at the end of the year, snuck into the playoffs and got hot at the right time, and they beat DC, who was the best team in the regular season at 9-1, and that only loss was to your Orlando Guardians.
Yep.
So,
but yeah, no, congrats to Rannell. Obviously, came back from an injury midway through the season, became a pretty much Arlington's main kickoff return specialist, and now he's got a ring, which is awesome.
And interestingly enough, the guy who he replaced as their kick returner was Adrian Killens, who was at Houston, then went to Arlington. They let Adrian go. And Adrian was just in the news just recently. He is now a coach at the Masters Academy, working under Garrett Kruzek, son of Mike Kruzek, former UCF coach. And Mike has moved on to Masters to be an assistant under Garrett. Is that right, Kyle? Did I see that right? I mean, it kind of like dropped a little. Or Bryson, actually, I think you probably saw it. It kind of dropped a little. It was the Daytona Beach News Journal that reported it because of Adrian, but that was like a buried lead in there. I was like, wow, that's quite the move for the Masters Academy.
It really is. Back when you and I talked to Coach Kruzek, he had been at Trinity Prep for a good long while, and so
yeah.
I mean, obviously, if he's going to moving to coach with Garrett makes a lot of sense. But I think it's much more the suddenness of all this that is that I think is just catching us aback, because you think there would have been a main article about Kruzek announcing that he's moving from Trinity Prep to the Masters Academy. But congratulations on the Kruzek family for getting a chance to coach together. I think that's really cool, a really cool thing for them to do. And they're going to be sticking in the Orlando area. So who knows? Maybe we might have another Holler brothers on the way.
I think Mike, no longer wanted to be a head coach, and he's kind of approaching retirement age, but he still wants to be around the game, and what better way to do that than around your son? So, Mike is officially the offensive coordinator under Garrett Kruzek, the head coach at TMA, and they're pulling in Adrian Killens to be running backs and special teams coach over at TMA as well on the blue turf.
Hopefully the Renegades give that man a ring since he played with them this year. That's all I'm going to
say. Give the guy a ring. Men's golf also we're going to be keeping an eye on here going forward. Bryson Turner. UCF has 2 individuals. Only one of them may advance. So who are we keeping an eye on here in the NCAA golf?
So we have Johnny Gervais and Luis Carrera of the men's golf team in the Salem Regional in Salem, North Carolina. So the way that the NCAA Regional works for individuals is that the lowest individual not on an advancing team to the championship will go to the championship as an individual. So as it stands right now, like say, for example, you have 5 schools, all 5 of their golfers on those teams will advance to the championship. And then of all the schools that don't advance below that, including the individual players, whoever is the lowest individual among all of them will get to the championship. So essentially Travale or Carrera have to be in that spot in order to do so. And as we are recording this, they are currently playing in the second round. So they're about halfway through, and they're about halfway through. So that'll certainly be something to keep an eye on to see if UCF will at least have a presence in the NCAA Men's Golf Championship.
Last but not least, shout out to Johnny Dawkins, who today the National Collegiate Basketball Hall of Fame, which is located in Kansas City, Missouri, announced their 2023 Hall of Fame class. And Johnny is part of it. He goes into the College Basketball Hall of Fame alongside, of course, his legendary college coach, Mike Krzyzewski of Duke, the just recently retired Mike Krzyzewski, among others. Tyler Hansbrough, North Carolina. Herb McGee, longtime coach at Jefferson College. But Dawkins and Coach K are the headliners, and Kyle Nash. Cheers to Coach Dawkins. It's interesting. Like we make a bigger deal about inductions into the College Football Hall of Fame in Atlanta. College Basketball Hall of Fame, kind of not so much because it's much more in the shadow of the Basketball Hall of Fame in Springfield, Massachusetts. But this is a great honor for Johnny, well deserved, and not a bad thing to have in the offseason. Get yourself inducted into another Hall of Fame, right?
Certainly enough. Let these hater fans be known. This guy, somebody recognizes him as a good coach. I could say that for sure. Yeah, and listen, I think the thing that I keep hitting with Johnny Dawkins over all the wins he's brought to UCF and all of the solid performance he has brought over his career, for an amount of money in his salary, by the way, that it may not be among the highest of coaches. He's still just such a great guy. And I think he really cares about making his players better men. I know it's a rosy line that a lot of coaches throw out, but I can tell you this, guys, when it comes to Johnny Dawkins, I see it in him. Heck, I think when he's talking to me, I feel like he's trying to make me a better guy. I say all of that to say, this is one of those feel-good stories. You like to see a guy like this get his flowers, especially when he doesn't as often as he should. So, yeah, there you go.
One of the greatest college basketball players was National Player of the Year in '86 at Duke. He's going in at the same class as Mike Krzyzewski, is very fitting on that.
Coach K's first great player.
Exactly. Mike Krzyzewski has said over the years, without Johnny Dawkins, there would be no Duke basketball the way we know it. So, very well deserved.
All right.
So, I'm all for it.
So that'll do it for us for this show that we recorded on Tuesday, May the 16th.
Hi, aren't you proud how I've joined you now in the hate of the ACC? I mean, aren't you proud of me? I mean, you've influenced me here.
I am astonished and encouraged.
You've turned me heel.
That's right. People can change for the better. Let that be the lesson.
Congrats to UCF Softball, UCF Track on their NCAA championships. We'll be following, or on their conference championships, I should say. We'll be following them the rest of this week. ELO, you'll be following UCF Softball, of course, very
closely. Tally, baby. Speaking of Tally, maybe I'll go over there and Michael offer.
I was going to say, are you going up there?
Yeah, I might just go confront him and, give him a piece of my mind.
I would pay to watch that. I would pay to watch that.
Let's... Bryson, if he does do that, I want you to go up there and live stream it on our Instagram, like you did with the Track
tag team.
Yeah,
I'll show him the Willie Taggart. I'll show him the Willie Taggart hire, and maybe that's why you're not making as much money.
Oh my God, please make this happen, God. I'd give you anything. Make sure you follow us here on the Night Shift Podcast. You can also find all of our written content on Black and Gold Banneret, blackandgoldbanneret.com. On Twitter, we are at UCF_SBN. Don't forget Facebook, Instagram, and of course our YouTube channel, where you can find Bryson and Nick running about Tampa, covering championships all over the place on USF's campus, which is always a sweet way to finish out. Follow us individually, Eric Lopez Elo, the SOTG for the student of the game, Kyle Nash. Nick is at Nick Porcelli 2. Bryson's at It's Bryson Turner. I'm at Jeff_Sharon. Shout out to our boy Drew, who's running into some health issues, not unlike what Kyle did last week, so we're giving him the week off. Statboy Drew on Twitter.
That's what happens when the Cleveland Browns schedule gets announced,
Harsh.
Must have had some of that
Eric's coming for everybody today.
Must have had some of that Skylight chili spilled on it from the wrestling schedule range. Anyway.
Oh my God. Drew, we're thinking of you as always. Feel better. Exactly how we're thinking of you, I don't know. Judge for yourself based on that last exchange, but we are thinking about you in some way. And that'll do it for us here on the Night Shift Podcast. For all of us here, I'm Jeff Sharon saying thank you for listening. Go Knights, charge on. We'll be following UCF in Tallahassee. Go Knights. Beat the Knowles.